Morales, and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. I'm happy to be back. Here are tonight's headlines.
The United States conducted a drone strike against an Islamic State target in Afghanistan as the airlift of those desperate to flee moves into its fraught final stages, with fresh terror attack warnings and encroaching Taliban forces primed to take over Kabul airport.
People evacuate high-risk areas and line up to buy supplies as Louisiana braces for Hurricane Ida, which is expected to strengthen to an extremely dangerous Category 4 hurricane when it hits the southern United States this weekend.
And Metro Manila will remain under modified enhanced community quarantine, the second strictest quarantine classification level, until September 7.
And an aid to humanity by the Church of Christ in Quebec, Canada. We will have EBC correspondent Sabir Mufti live at the scene.
The United States conducted a drone strike against an Islamic State target in Afghanistan on Saturday as the airlift of those desperate to flee moved into its fraught final stages, with fresh terror attack warnings and encroaching Taliban forces primed to take over Kabul airport. The attack was claimed by a regional chapter of the Islamic State group, and the Pentagon announced it had carried out a drone attack on the planner from the jihadist group in eastern Afghanistan. Captain Bill Urban of the Central Command said, "We know of no civilian casualties," he said in a statement announcing the first reported U.S. strike since the attack. The strike launched from outside of Afghanistan came as the airlift of evacuees from Kabul airport continued under much heightened security after Thursday's attack. At least 78 people were killed, including 13 U.S. troops, when a suicide attacker exploded a bomb in the dense crowd in front of the airport's Abbey Gate. Some media reported that fatalities numbered close to 200. U.S. officials said gunmen opened fire after the explosion, adding to the carnage.
We still believe there are credible threats. In fact, I'd say specific credible threats.
The national security team the president met with this morning advised the president and vice president that another terror attack in Kabul is likely.
When the president says, "We will hunt you down and make you pay," what does that look like? Is he going to order a mission to kill the people responsible, or would he be satisfied if they are captured and brought to trial?
I think he made clear yesterday that he does not want them to live on the earth anymore.
We will be able to fly out evacuees right up until the last moment. That's going to be the goal.
With the airlift window narrowing sharply ahead of an August 31 deadline, more than 5,000 people remain inside Kabul airport awaiting evacuation, and crowds continue to throng the perimeter gates, pleading for entry. Some Western allies, including Britain and Spain, announced an end to their airlifts on Friday, following other nations such as Canada and Australia earlier in the week. Many have repeatedly warned that it will be impossible to get all at-risk Afghans out by Tuesday.
And then we'll have to do the server stacks.
The United States urged its citizens Friday to immediately leave the gates around Kabul's airport, where a suicide bomber this week targeted crowds trying to flee Taliban rule. Now, earlier Friday, the Pentagon said that the high-risk Kabul airlift operation to evacuate Americans and Afghan allies still face specific credible threats. U.S. citizens who are at the Abbey Gate, East Gate, North Gate, or the new ministry of Interior Gate now should leave immediately, the U.S. Embassy in Kabul said in a security alert. The embassy said because of security threats at the Kabul airport, we continue to advise U.S. citizens to avoid traveling to the airport and to avoid airport gates. The alert gave no further details on what the security threats might be, but it followed Thursday's attack that killed scores of people, including 13 U.S. servicemen.
Meanwhile, the United Nations said it was bracing for a worst-case scenario of up to 500,000 more refugees from Afghanistan by the end of 2021. Images of Afghans who have crossed into Pakistan at the Chaman border crossing. Ajmad is one of them, and he said he left Afghanistan because he had no work once the Taliban took over. Take a look.
बहुत वक्त से झगड़ा था अभी तालिबान की हमारा रोजगार भी खराब है हम इतना भी नहीं ला सकते कि अपने बच्चे को रोटी खिलाएं उसके लिए हम अब पाकिस्तान आए हैं जब अफगानिस्तान में अमन आ जाएगा झगड़ा खत्म हो जाएगा हम वापस अपने वतन चले जाएंगे अफगानिस्तान कंधार में हम ज्यादा है हम मुश्किल में है हम इधर आए जब अमन आ जाएगा वापस चले जाएंगे
The organization said that there was not a flood of people fleeing across Afghanistan's borders, but added it was laying contingency plans for that to change as the country's crisis deepens. The UN on Friday presented a plan for UN agencies and partner NGOs to prepare for and respond to the unfolding crisis within Afghanistan and in neighboring countries. It urgently appealed for nearly $300 million to fund the plan. The UN said in particular Iran and Pakistan, who together host 90% of the Afghan refugees in the region, along with some 3 million other Afghans without refugee status, will need a lot of support.
U.S. President Joe Biden promises America will complete the mission in Afghanistan despite at least 72 civilians and 13 U.S. troops being killed in a suicide bombing at Kabul airport on Thursday, while speaking at a bilateral meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett in the Oval Office of the White House. Take a look.
But it's a worthy mission because they continue to evacuate folks out of that region, out of the airport, evacuated more than 12,000 additional people out of the airport in the last 24 hours. I met with my commanders this morning, first thing in the morning, got a detailed briefing about yesterday's attacks and the measures they're taking to protect our forces and complete the mission. And we will complete the mission. Now, I'm not
Under enormous criticism at home and abroad for his handling of the Afghan crisis and the U.S. military withdrawal, Biden has pledged to stick to the airlift deadline and to punish those responsible for the suicide blast. About 109,000 people have been flown out of the country since August 14, the day before the Taliban swept to power, that according to the U.S. government. Some Western allies, including Britain and Spain, announced an end to their airlifts on Friday, following other nations such as Canada and Australia earlier in the week.
Meanwhile, the United Kingdom will continue its operation to evacuate people from Afghanistan despite the attack at the capital's airport. Here's Ashley Espiritu for that report. Ashley.
Thank you. Britain will continue the operation to evacuate nationals and Afghans from Kabul, despite Thursday's barbaric bomb attack, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said. He stated that we've been ready for it and we're going to continue with that operation. We're now coming towards the very end of it in any event, he said. We're going to work flat out, getting people through as fast as they can still, and we're going to keep going up until the last moment, said the Prime Minister, shortly after chairing a meeting of the Emergency COBR Committee. He said that members of the US military had very sadly lost their lives in the attacks, as well as many Afghan casualties. The threat of a terrorist attack was one of the constraints that we've been operating under during the operation, Johnson added. He continues by saying that clearly what this attack shows is the importance of continuing that work in as fast and as efficient manner as possible in the hours that remain to us, and that's what we're going to do. The UK leader called the attacks barbaric and paid tribute to the phenomenal effort of those involved in the evacuation operation.
Well, Sam, I can confirm that there's been a barbaric terrorist attack, what looks like a series of attacks in Kabul on the airport, on the crowds at the airport, in which members of the US military, very sadly, have lost their lives, and many Afghan casualties as well. And we extend our condolences both to the United States of America and to the people of Afghanistan.
Boris Johnson says that there's been nothing like it for decades and decades, adding that the overwhelming majority of those who are eligible have been extracted from Afghanistan. Around 12,000 Britons and Afghans who assisted the country during the war have been evacuated in the operation, said Johnson. The Ministry of Defence later said on Twitter that there have been no reported UK military or UK government casualties following this incident in Kabul. UK forces are working closely with our partners to provide security and medical assistance, he added. 2 explosions struck near the main gate of the airport, causing multiple casualties in what the US military labelled a complex attack that took place as countries raced to complete evacuations from Afghanistan. One explosion hit the Baron Hotel about 200 yards from the Abbey Gate, which had been used by some Western nations as a staging point for evacuation since the airlift began on August 14. In the wake of the attack, the British government issued a notice to aviation advising airlines to avoid Afghan airspace under 7,600 meters. Thank you for having me today. I'm Ashley Spiritu reporting from London, United Kingdom, and we live in interesting times.
To the U.S. now, where residents evacuated high-risk areas and lined up to buy supplies Friday as Louisiana braced for Hurricane Ida, expected to strengthen to an extremely dangerous Category 4 storm when it hits the southern United States this weekend. Take a look.
Please make use of all the time that you have between now and tomorrow night to prepare for this storm, for yourself and for your family. Take it seriously. This is going to be a very serious storm. You saw the Category 4 winds that we are anticipated, the storm surge that in areas could get, up to 15 feet and so forth. And also, when you start talking about rain that in localized areas could approach 20 inches.
Landfall is expected sometime on Sunday with heavy rains as well as an impact overnight into Monday morning. Again, a very fluid situation. The earliest reasonable time is late Saturday night. Preparations, as you should know, should be completed by this time frame. At this time, I am calling for mandatory evacuation of all areas outside of our levee protection system.
The National Weather Service is now forecasting a life-threatening storm surge when the hurricane makes landfall along the coasts of Louisiana and Mississippi, warning of catastrophic wind damage and urging those in affected areas to follow advice from local officials. Now, Louisiana has declared a state of emergency in preparation for the storm, forecast to make U.S. landfall Sunday, 16 years to the day after the devastating Hurricane Katrina first hit the state, which flooded 80% of New Orleans and killed more than 1,800 people. Officials have already ordered mandatory evacuations outside the levee-protected areas of New Orleans and flood-prone coastal towns on the state's coast, such as Grand Isle. NHC said the storm was likely to produce heavy rainfall and considerable flooding from southeast Louisiana to coastal Mississippi and Alabama. Scientists have warned of a rise in the number of powerful cyclones as the ocean surface warms due to climate change, posing an increasing threat to the world's coastal communities.
Meanwhile, Hurricane Ida struck Cuba in the province of Pinar del Rio, the current coronavirus epicenter of the island. More than 10,000 people were evacuated and electricity was cut off ahead of the storm as a precaution. In the capital, Havana, public transport was suspended by midday and thousands of people were evacuated. Ida is now packing 75 miles per hour winds, enough to cause considerable damage to agriculture and homes of poor construction at 2 p.m. Cuban time. The center of the storm was approaching the Isle of Youth and 145 miles from the western tip of Pinar del Rio. Its movement speed northwest is 15 miles per hour. A hurricane warning is also in effect for the province of Artemisa and tropical storm warning for Havana, Mayabic and Matanzas. After Cuba, Ida is forecast to move on a course, taking it to the U.S. Gulf Coast, possibly as a powerfully Category 4 hurricane.
Meanwhile, two cities in China's central province of Henan, Xinjiang and Changyuan, a transportation hub for China, issued highest flood warnings, calling for local agencies to prepare for torrential rains. Now take a look. Henan also suspended port and wharf production. Trains in and out of provincial capital Zhengzhou are partially delayed or canceled. China has been battered by unprecedented rains in recent months, extreme weather that experts say is increasingly common due to global warming. On August 13, in Hubei, torrential rains caused power cuts and landslides, destroying hundreds of homes and forcing the evacuation of nearly 6,000 people, the province's Emergency Management Bureau said, as reservoirs reach dangerous levels. China's Meteorological Administration warned that heavy rainfall was likely to continue this week, with regions along the Yangtze River, including Shanghai, vulnerable to flooding.
In a related news, climate change made the deadly floods that devastated parts of Germany and Belgium last month up to 9 times more likely, according to an international study published last Tuesday. Now, at least 190 people lost their lives in severe floods that pummeled western Germany in mid-July, and at least 38 people perished after extreme rainfall in Belgium's southern Wallonia region. Using the growing specialty of attribution science, climate experts are increasingly able to link man-made climate change to specific extreme weather events. To calculate the role of climate change on the rainfall that led to the floods, scientists analyzed weather records and computer simulations to compare the climate today, which is around 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer due to man-made emissions, with the climate of the past. And they calculated that the floods were between 1.2 and 9 times more likely to happen in today's warmer climate compared to a scenario where no heating had occurred since the pre-industrial era. By analyzing local rainfall patterns across Western Europe, the authors of Tuesday's study were able to estimate the likelihood of an event similar to last month's floods occurring again. And they found that similar events could be expected to hit at any given area about once in 400 years at current warming levels. And this means, they said, several events on the scale of the German and Belgian floods are likely across Western Europe within that time frame. And now an aid to humanity happening, an aid to humanity by the Church of Christ in Quebec, Canada. Live with us at the scene is Sabir Mufti. Hello, Sabir.
Oh, bonjour.
Bonjour, Sabir.
You. Oui, on est ici au Gatineau, Québec, au Canada, à peu près 10 minutes de notre capitale nationale du Canada, Ottawa. We are here in Gatineau, Quebec, Canada, where the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, with the assistance of the Iglesia ni Cristo Church of Christ members, are conducting an aid to humanity event, providing help to those in surrounding shelters. The event will showcase talents from the Iglesia ni Cristo members and remarks from church and government officials. This event continues the church's global campaign to help those in need. And with us today, we have the District Minister of Ottawa, the District of Ottawa, Mr. J.R. Razon. Mr. J.R. Razon, thank you for joining us today. If you could tell us a little bit about this event and give us some background, some information, and what's happening today.
Yes, we are preparing for a big event because this is in line with what we are doing in the foundation, the Felix Manalo Foundation, which is the charitable arm of the church. And the volunteers have been preparing these care packages so that we can help our fellow men here in the Gatineau community. And many of them could not sleep. And what we've seen today is outpouring of love. And we truly believe that this kind of love will transcend through these kinds of humanitarian works, which is why if we're eager to do that, it's not difficult to help them if we have the capability to do so.
Now the church has been doing many of these events globally. How does that impact what's happening in this world?
Well, we are aware that in every corner of the globe, we are fighting poverty. Even in countries that people may view as a powerful and influential country, but due to the global pandemic and the social unrest, it has really aggravated the economy presently. So wherever we are, people are really in need of help. And that's why, even in this part of the world, we will help through our leadership of our executive minister in the church, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo. And it is his initiative, which is why the members and volunteers are inspired to fulfill this noble work of loving our fellow men through these generous care packages.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Razon. I appreciate your time today, and we hope today that would be a fantastic event. Now joining us once again with us is one of the directors of the Moisson Outaouais, which is one of the shelters here in Quebec, in Gatineau, Quebec, Miss Diane Dupont. Hello, Ms. Dupont. Thank you for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about what's going on again, your thoughts about today's event, and how this is helping your shelter?
Moisson Outaouais is actually the regional food bank for the Outaouais region. So we cover 30,000 square kilometers of territory and support 49 organisms, food banks, shelters across the region. So to see this spread helping us, helping people, is just wonderful. And I'd really, really like to thank Brother Eduardo Manalo and Church of Christ for doing this. It's fantastic.
Wonderful. We thank you so much for coming today, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
And now one of the organizers as well, one of the ministers of the Church of Christ helping the district is Brother Roland Andrade. Hi, Mr. Roland Andrade.
Hello, good morning.
Could you tell us a little bit again about what's happening today, your involvement in this event?
Yes, we're conducting today an AIDS Humanity project spearheaded by the volunteers of Felix Manalo Foundation and, of course, by the members of the Iglesia ni Cristo or Church of Christ.
And I understand there's about 15 shelters that are coming. Do you know approximately how many people are coming today?
We are expecting hundreds of recipients who would come from 4 significant shelters, and we are here for them and to help them, support them in their needs, because in the church and in the Felix Manalo Foundation, we are advocates of outreach initiatives, especially now that many people are in need, and of course, they're victimized by the current pandemic. We are here for them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
And we've got one of the hosts today, who's also been part of the organization, Mr. Jean-Marc Chatrin. Mr. Chatrin, how are you today?
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
I'm great. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about I see it's raining a little bit, but that's okay. Tell us a little bit about what this event happening today and your involvement.
So I will be the host today for this event. We're very excited, even though it's just a little rain. It's okay. Everything will go smooth. We're here to give hope and give care package to the community with what's happening right now with the COVID-19 and all that. Lately, a lot of the population have been hit harder than some other place. So that's why we're here, to give them hope, to give them our love, and to show them that we're here to support them.
What kind of program can people expect today?
We have dancing, we have singing, we have a lot of special performance in store for them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Care. And another ministers in the District of Ottawa, Mr. Lenito de Aro. So, yes. Oh, Mr. Lenito de Aro. How are you?
Good. We're excited in this activity.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, for now, we learn from the church administration through the leadership of our beloved executive minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, whenever we can do good to others. That's why we conduct this aid to humanity activity to help especially the needy people and also to extend our love for them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here and thank you for your time. And now we have one of the main organizers of this event, worked tirelessly, as I've understood, Mr. Andre Lajoie.
Good morning, Good morning. How are you this morning?
Oh, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very happy to be here today.
Tell us your involvement today.
Well, my involvement was to contact the shelters, the soup kitchens, the members of the parliament, many people, in fact, that to be able to join us in this celebration of the foundation of Eduardo V. Manalo. I'm very glad to be here this morning.
Wonderful. And we've got some participants coming already. I heard. Who else is going to be here? You know?
Well, we invited some members of the parliament and the MPs of Hall Elmer, Greg Fergus, and Stephen McKinnon from Gatineau. We also invited the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, which we're still waiting to find out if they're coming. But with the weather, we hope that it's going to cooperate today. So, yes. And we have also members of the directors of many shelters of Gatineau, Hall Elmer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Abir. Thank you.
Well, that's we're here in Gatineau, Quebec. Even though it's raining, we're still pushing forward for this wonderful event. For Eagle News International, Sabir Mufti, we live in interesting times.
Xavier, and I know that you're going to have a very interesting and fantastic event over there. You take care, and we'll be looking forward to the developments on that story. Thank you very much, Sabir.
Thank you, Alma.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Welcome back to the news. The U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday blocked the extension of a federal moratorium on evictions, ending a protection granted to millions who have struggled to avoid rent during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, in a 6-3 ruling, the court sided with homeowners who claimed to be victims of unwarranted measures and argued that any renewal of a moratorium must be decided by Congress and not health officials. The court's unsigned majority opinion said that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, had exceeded its authority with its latest order temporarily halting evictions in areas where coronavirus cases were surging. It is up to Congress, not the CDC, to decide whether the public interest merits further action here, read the 8-page majority opinion. The court's 3 liberal justices dissented, citing fears that evictions could exacerbate the spread of the Delta variant. The case was prompted by the CDC's latest 2-month-long moratorium rolled out on August 3. An earlier September 2020 moratorium issued by the CDC expired after a Supreme Court ruling in June said it could not continue beyond July 31st without authorization from Congress. President Joe Biden's administration had urged Congress to approve an extension, but U.S. lawmakers failed to do so before summer recess. Under pressure from Democrats, the CDC ordered a new moratorium, citing public health risks posed by the pandemic. The Supreme Court has now ended that moratorium. The White House had expected the moratorium to be challenged in court, but hoped the extra time would allow for emergency rental assistance funds approved by Congress to reach those in need. But much of that money is still caught in red tape, even as around 3.5 million people in the U.S. told the Census Bureau they face eviction in the next 2 months. The White House said, in light of the ruling and the continued risk of COVID-19 transmission, President Biden is once again calling on all entities that can prevent evictions to urgently act to prevent evictions. Staying in the U.S., a judge overruled Florida's conservative pro-Trump governor Friday and said the state's schools can make mask wearing mandatory. Now, Judge John Cooper sided with a group of parents who had filed a lawsuit challenging an executive order by Governor Ron DeSantis that barred schools from making students and school staff wearing masks to fight COVID-19. Several school districts in Florida had decided to make masks mandatory because of a rise in cases fueled by the Delta variant of the virus. DeSantis, a faithful Republican ally of former President Donald Trump, opposes such a measure on grounds it violates people's individual liberties. He signed an order July 30th prohibiting schools from imposing mask mandates. The judge also barred the state education department from punishing school districts that defy the executive order from DeSantis. Now, last week, the state government had threatened 2 school districts that ignored the governor, saying it would withhold funding equal to the monthly salary of the school board members. Since the start of this school year, students in several Florida's counties have been forced to quarantine after catching the coronavirus or coming into contact with infected people.
Although Australian case numbers and deaths are still fairly low compared to the rest of the world's outbreaks, such as in Europe and the United States, the continuous rise in numbers that the country is currently facing, particularly in New South Wales, has put the country in such distress and turmoil, forcing snap lockdowns, extended lockdowns, and even tighter restrictions in certain parts of the area. Eagle News correspondent Justine Vicente reports.
Although Australian case numbers and deaths are still quite fairly low compared to the rest of the world's worst outbreaks, such as in Europe and the United States, the continuous rise in case numbers that the country is currently facing, particularly in the state of New South Wales, has put the country in such distress and turmoil. forcing snap lockdowns, extended lockdowns, and tighter restrictions all over the country. Just over 2 months since the surge of the ongoing Delta variant in Australia, New South Wales has announced a series of additional lockdown restrictions to further ensure the safety and protection of residents in New South Wales, specifically in Greater Sydney. To warrant the implementation of these new tightened restrictions, the State Police Force has launched Operation Stay at Home, which gives officers the ability to raise on-the-spot infringement notices from $1,000 to $5,000 for any rules found to be broken or any offences made. Furthermore, as of last Saturday, a lockdown for the entire state of New South Wales was announced as all of regional New South Wales was put into a snap 7-day lockdown from 5 p.m. Saturday. After Premier Gladys Berejiklian stated she received health advice prompting such a decision to be made.
Even though we've had high case numbers, the rate of hospitalisation has still been relatively low and the mortality rate has been relatively low compared to other outbreaks in Australia. So that gives us heart that our strategy is definitely working, that our strategy in being safe, in opening up at the right time will also be managed well. And we also have confidence that even though the public are very frustrated and at times very angry in some of the decisions we've had to take, the public is really responding, and thank you to all of you who are...
The new stay-at-home orders applied to people living in regional New South Wales will replace any existing restrictions that were originally put in place. New South Wales is currently enduring its worst possible days of the COVID-19 pandemic so far. It is only reasonable for members of the community to abide by all restrictions put into place in order for us to go back to our once normal lives. Reporting from Sydney, Australia, this is Justine Vicente, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Justine. Now, India has given more than 10 million COVID-19 jabs in a single day for the first time, authorities said, as the South Asian giant bolsters its defenses for a predicted new surge. The Health Ministry says the 10 million landmark was passed on Friday, beating the country's previous daily record of 9.2 million. The government has been stung by criticism after a brutal coronavirus wave in April and May killed more than 200,000 people. Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed the milestone as a momentous feat. India's daily infection count has dropped dramatically since the devastating surge in April to May, which overwhelmed its creaking health infrastructure. India is currently administering 3 vaccines: the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, known locally as Covishield, Covaxin by Indian firm Bharat Biotech, and the Russian-made Sputnik V. Almost all restrictions on movement and activity have been lifted, even though experts have warned of a new wave hitting as early as next month as the festival season starts. Daily case numbers have started rising again above 40,000 and more than 500 deaths were reported on Saturday. The 46,000 new cases reported was the highest figure in 2 months. Much of the spike has been blamed on a surge in the southern state of Kerala.
In other news, Japan is investigating the death of 2 men who had received jabs from batches of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine suspended from use due to contamination, according to the Health Ministry today. The men, aged 30 and 38, died earlier this month after getting their second Moderna doses from one of 3 manufacturing lots suspended by the government on Thursday after several vials were found to be contaminated, according to the ministry in a statement. The ministry said the cause of death was still being investigated and currently causal relations with the vaccinations are unknown. Both men contracted fever after receiving their vaccinations and neither had underlying health conditions on allergic history, according to the ministry. The suspension affects 1.63 million doses of Moderna vaccines, which have been reportedly shipped to over 800 vaccination centers across Japan. Takeda, which is in charge of sales and distribution of the Moderna shot in Japan, said it received reports from several vaccination centers that foreign substances have been found inside unopened vials.
Metro Manila will remain under Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine, or MECQ, the second strictest quarantine classification level until September 7. Here's Presidential Spokesperson Harry Roque.
Para sa community quarantine classifications sa buwan ng Setyembre, ang duration po nito ay mula 1 ng Setyembre hanggang 7 ng Setyembre lamang. Dahil maaari magkaroon po ng pagbabago sa mga quarantine guidelines sa mga darating na araw. Inaprubahan po ng inyong IATF na i-retain ang Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine or MECQ status sa National Capital Region. MECQ rin po ang Apayao, Ilocos Norte, Bulacan at Bataan sa Region 3, Cavite, Lucena City, Rizal at Laguna sa Region 4A sa Luzon. Tapos po sa Aklan, Iloilo Province at Iloilo City sa Region 6, Lapu-Lapu City, Cebu City at Mandawi City sa Region 7 sa Visayas at Cagayan de Oro sa Mindanao. Ang NCR, Bataan at Laguna ay mayroong added restrictions sa dining, personal care services at religious activities. Bawal pa po ito bagamat nasa MECQ na tayo. Samantala, ang Ilocos Sur, Cagayan, Quezon at Batangas sa Region 4A at Naga City sa Luzon, Antique, Bacolod, Capiz at Bacolod City at Capiz sa Region 6, Cebu Province at Negros Oriental sa Region 7 sa Visayas, Zamboanga del Sur, Misamis Oriental, Davao City, Davao del Norte, Davao Occidental at Davao de Oro sa Region 7 at Butuan City sa Caraga sa Mindanao ay nasa General Community Quarantine or GCQ with heightened restriction. Nasa GCQ naman ang Baguio City sa Cordillera Administrative Region, Santiago City, Quirino, Isabela at Nueva Vizcaya sa Region 2, Tarlac sa Region 3 at Puerto Princesa sa 4B sa Luzon, Guimaras at Negros Occidental sa Region 6 sa Visayas, Zamboanga Sibugay, Zamboanga City at Zamboanga del Norte sa Region 9, Davao Oriental at Davao del Sur sa Region 11, General Santos City, Sultan Kudarat, Sarangani, North Cotabato at South Cotabato sa Region 12, Agusan del Sur, Agusan del Norte, Surigao del Norte, Surigao del Sur at Dinagat Island sa Caraga at Cotabato City sa Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, Muslim Mindanao sa Mindanao. Lahat ng mga lugar na hindi nabanggit ay nasa Modified General Community Quarantine.
In other news, the man convicted of shooting dead Robert F. Kennedy in a 1968 assassination that rocked the United States was granted parole on Friday, U.S. time. Sirhan Sirhan, now 77, has been behind bars for 5 decades, despite doubts that he fired the shots that likely changed the course of U.S. politics. Kennedy, the younger brother of slain President John F. Kennedy, was campaigning for the Democratic nomination when he was gunned down in a Los Angeles hotel. His murder came just months after the killing of Black civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. and as a divided America was deep in an unpopular war in Vietnam. Sirhan was convicted and sentenced to death in 1969 after pleading guilty. His death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment several years later. But doubts soon surfaced that he was actually responsible for Bobby Kennedy's death, with claims that there could have been a second gunman in the Ambassador Hotel on June 5, 1968.
In other news, the death toll from explosions at an arms depot in southern Kazakhstan climbed to 13, authorities in the ex-Soviet country said Saturday, adding that 3 people were still missing. Take a look. The blasts occurred at a Defense Ministry ammunitions depot in the southern Jambil region, leaving dozens injured and forcing the evacuation of more than 1,000 people from nearby villages. The Central Asian country's emergencies ministry said Saturday a 13th body was recovered at the site but had not been identified. President Kasim Jomart Tokayev announced that Sunday would be a day of national mourning for the military personnel and rescuers who died at the scene of that disaster. Praising their heroism, Tokayev wrote on Twitter Saturday that the victims would always remain in the memory of the people. On Friday, he acknowledged systemic problems with Kazakhstan's ammunition storage. Regular incidents at Kazakhstan's Soviet-era military depots have proven a headache for the government. Another depot near the southern town of Aris has seen 3 lethal explosions in the last decade. Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Sa pagpasok ng Delta variant dito sa Pilipinas, tumataas ang kaso ng COVID-19 araw-araw. Government restrictions like ECQ and now MECQ are put in place to prevent further infections. Ito ay nakakaapekto sa mga small business owners dahil limitado ang paggalaw ng mga tao. In this episode, we'll find out how the owners of an auto dealership are adapting to the changing times. Tatalakayin natin ito kasama ang ating mga bisitang sina IQ at Ia Prado mula sa EMC Prado Auto Inc.
Every day we still learn. Every day we try to innovate. We try to pivot small to the left, small to the right, to be able to press the right buttons.
Don't be afraid to invest at this time. And always look at the customer.
All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Delta variant presents a near-term risk. The prospects are good for continued progress toward maximum employment.
Welcome back. Federal Chair Jerome Powell said that the U.S. economic recovery is on track to return to a strong labor market in a speech to the annual Jackson Hole Central Banking Symposium. Let's listen in.
With vaccinations rising, schools reopening, and enhanced unemployment benefits ending, some factors that may be holding back job seekers are likely fading. While the Delta variant presents a near-term risk, the prospects are good for continued progress toward maximum employment.
But the Fed leader stressed that there was no hurry to raise the benchmark lending rate in response to temporary inflation pressures. Take a look.
Today, with substantial slack remaining in the labor market and the pandemic continuing, with vaccinations rising, schools reopening, and enhanced unemployment benefits ending, some factors that may be holding back job seekers are likely fading. While the Delta variant presents a near-term risk, the prospects are good for continued progress toward maximum employment.
While inflation is currently running at a high 4.2% annually as of July, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said it was likely to decline as temporary pressures like skyrocketing prices for used cars recede. He warned that moving to respond to temporary inflation measures may do more harm than good. Take a look.
The ill-timed policy move unnecessarily slows hiring and other economic activity and pushes inflation lower than desired. Today, with substantial slack remaining in the labor market and the pandemic continuing, such a mistake could be particularly harmful.
Meanwhile, Britain's factories, restaurants, and supermarkets are facing stubborn supply problems due to the COVID pandemic and Brexit, sparking calls this week for government help ahead of the holidays. U.S. burger chain McDonald's ran out of milkshakes and bottled drinks this week, blaming a lorry driver shortage that created supply chain issues and a slowdown in the UK business activity. Rival fast food giant KFC was forced to remove some items from the menu, while restaurant chain Mando's has temporarily shut 50 outlets due to a lack of chicken. Supermarkets are also feeling the heat, with frozen food group Iceland and retail king Tesco warning of the holiday product shortages. Britain's powerful CBI business lobby warns retail and distribution stocks are at a record low. Iceland boss Richard Walker told the BBC he estimates Britain currently faces a shortage of about 100,000 lorry drivers. COVID helped spark a supply chain crisis, according to experts, as multiple lockdowns prompted a fresh exodus of EU workers.
Protesters gather outside bank buildings in Kabul after government buildings, banks, passport offices, schools and universities remain largely closed since the Taliban seized power in Afghanistan. Take a look.
تقریبا لس ورځې کېږي موږ دولتي کارمندان یو دلته خپل معاشونو ته منتظر یو کور کې مریضي لرو مشکلات لرو چې د خپل معاشونه واخلو دلته څومره خلک دي دا ټول زه خو خپله شخصا لس ورځې کېږي دلته معاشونو ته منتظر یم موږ معاشونه نه راکوي تقریبا 2 ورځې مخکې چهارشنبې په ورځ بانک خلاص او نیمه ورځ فعالیت وکړو بیا پنجشنبې په ورځ هم لږ فعالیت وکړو اوس بیا بانک بند دی.
Now, the closures were in response to fears that the group's arrival in the city would see bloodshed and looting. As the days passed, though, the banks remained shuttered due to Washington's decision to cut off access to $7 billion of the Afghan central bank's gold and cash reserves in the Federal Reserve. Only a few private firms, including telecom companies, have been operating since the Taliban swept back to power, although there have also been 2 public holidays since then. A spokesperson for IMF on Wednesday said it had decided to withhold its assistance to Afghanistan amid uncertainty over the status of the leadership in Kabul.
And finally, in our news, X-Class drone racing is the world's first giant drone racing league. And this year, Townsville will be hosting the Australian X-Class Open. Morgan Goodfellow is with us for the report. Morgan.
X-Class Drone Racing is the world's first giant drone racing league. And this year, Townsville will be hosting the Australian X-Class Open. The annual Australian X-Class Drone Racing event will be held in Townsville this year, gathering participants over 2 massive days to compete as they face off to be crowned champion. From the 21st of August to the 22nd, at the Townsville Radio Aeronautical Control Society, the Australian X-Class Open will host the event, providing the space needed to facilitate the scene for some serious giant drone racing. The intuitive sport of drone racing displays medium to large-scale robotic drones that maneuver a circuit congested with obstacles, piloted by remote control. Unlike motorsports, the course of a drone race can be 3-dimensional, with obstacles needed to be navigated around, under, over, and even through. The pilot remains on the ground, viewing the course from an FPV, or a first-person view, via a headset connecting to the view of the drone. Drone racing began as an underground activity, with the early stages of the hobby taking place in empty car parks and parking garages, which are still considered a favoured venue for drone racing. The constant rise of drone racing has definitely shown its potential to become a major event someday. What is your role in today's event?
So I'm just here basically with some of my larger models, just to, I guess, to show the public a few of the different things that we do in aero modelling. So drones is one part of it. Obviously, then we've got the planes as well, in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, as well as helicopters and the likes as well. So I'm here as one of the Tracks Club members. Just basically brought my planes out to have a bit of so people could have a look at them. Also the Vice President for the Queensland Association, the MAAQ, which was happy enough basically to support this event and get the sport of aero modelling out there to the public.
There's 3 different events. There's X class, which are the big ones. The smaller is Beast class, and then they've got a freestyle event later on this afternoon, which will finish tomorrow.
The winners for each division are expected to win some big money, as the sponsors for this event in the past have been very generous. Reporting from Townsville, Australia, this is Morgan Goodfellow, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you,
That
Morgan.
looks fun to watch.
Yeah.
I want to watch that in person.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you, Morgan. Well, that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. It is the weekend. I'm CJ Hero. We'll see you back on Monday.
Yes, we'll see you back on Monday. And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.